In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to take apart and reassemble the Crosman Z77 Uzi, which was discontinued in the 1980s. Mainly because if you come across one of these, the chances are it's not going to work, and you're going to need to know how to fix it. So first off, I'm going to take the side cover off where the CO2 cartridge goes, and we're going to turn it over, and we're going to remove the 5 screws from the left-hand side of the receiver. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. This one right here is a fake one. That one actually kind of fooled me at first, but you just have 5 to take out. It's an actual Crosman pistol that they stuck inside of this upper enclosure to make it look like an Uzi, which I think it's pretty funny. I'm going to go ahead and speed up the footage, taking these screws out so you don't have to watch that. Okay, and as just for general reference, all of the screws are the same length, except for the one in the forward sight, so that way you won't get anything mixed up. The top half of the receiver will now come off, and I'm going to set it aside carefully. And as you can see here, this is a average off-the-shelf, run-of-the-mill Crosman 338 Auto that they have stuffed inside of this plastic enclosure. So, check it out. It is just a 338 Auto. They pulled the snub nose off and added a longer barrel. But that's all they did to make this work. So I'm going to take the little BB loading door off because I don't want to lose it, and I'll take the forward sight off and set this aside. Now we can take a look at the pistol itself. First thing you're going to want to do is take the screw out of the left hand side of the grip and just move that on out of the way. Like that. Now you have 2 screws. One here, one here. Take them both out. Longer screw goes towards the front of the gun, shorter screw goes towards the rear. And before I pull the top of this off, you probably should have done this beforehand, is the return spring for the hammer assembly inside. Just go ahead and pop that off that peg and pull it out. So it's just on the hammer assembly inside and then goes to the peg. Really easy to remember. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the valve assembly with this flat blade while I lift up on this. That way not everything is going to go flying. And you'll see already that things are trying to lift up out of here. I'm going to go ahead and pull some of these pieces out of my way. Mainly this one, because this is the easiest to damage. This is your breech assembly. I'm going to pull the pin out of the trigger. Well, let's take the spring off first. Take the spring off, then pull the pin out of the trigger, and just get everything out of the gun. This is essentially what makes the gun work. This little guy right here. If this spring is damaged at all, you're going to need to order another one, because there's just no fixing it once it's bent. And all of these parts, including this loader, which actually does have a magnet inside of it for holding onto the BBs. If this is damaged in any way, you're going to need to replace it. You can go to jgairguns.biz, and if you look up Crosman Z77, it will not come up. You have to look it up for the 338 Auto. And there's tons of parts for it. You're good. If you need parts, you're golden. Now, the reason your gun isn't working is probably this. This is your valve assembly. You have the power lit seal, which is right here. You unscrew this collar, and there's a power lit seal underneath. This is the old one right here. I've already rebuilt it. It's a little rubber seal. It's all turned this brown color from age. Then if you take a flat blade, let me grab my tool here. I went to a flea market and I picked up this 5/16 forged, cheapo screwdriver. I think I gave $1 for it. It's rather wide at the top. What I did was I took a Dremel. You can do this with a file as well, and you notch it out like that. And that is so you can make it around the valve stem and unscrew this collar. And inside you're going to first come across the valve end seal, which is this guy right here. It's rather hard. It's almost plastic-like. That will be right underneath this cap. You pull out the valve stem, there's going to be a spring, then there's a washer. And underneath the washer, there's going to be an O-ring, but it's going to be like a transparent brown, and the chances are it's going to have a big hunk blown out of it because it's super old. The kit from JG Airguns will come with the power outlet seal, it'll come with the valve end seal, and the forward valve seal. So when you take the washer out, you remove the old O-ring, drop your new one in, washer, spring, stem, end seal, then cap it. So I don't need to do that because this one's already rebuilt. Now we're going to focus on putting this thing back together, because this is probably where you're going to end up. There's also this spring right here, which obviously the little point is going to go up. So I will show you what to do there. The hammer assembly just pivots here. You can pull the pin out, remove it, clean it, whatever you want to do. But I'm going to take the valve assembly and put it in. And then we need to get the breech assembly in. And you're going to think that the square hole goes up, because that makes sense. The breech would come down, and then this would naturally lift it up. And you would be wrong in thinking that. The square hole actually goes down, and so does the spring. So the spring faces down, and so does the square hole. And the very end of your trigger assembly is going to go in that hole for raising and lowering the breech assembly. So this is where things get kind of complicated, and it's going to be a little difficult to film. So you have this channel inside, this little middle channel right here. That is where you're going to put the spring. You're going to load the spring in here. At the bottom lip, push it in. Spring is loaded. That's in. Now things are going to get a little complicated. You have this spring right here, which the part that's folded up comes out of this hole. So you will need to snake the end of your trigger into the square hole in the breech while trying to line it up with this spring right here. So this is going to get fun. Let's go ahead and try to put the spring on here first, then drop it in. There's all kinds of ways to do this. It's just whatever works best for you. Put the pin back in. Alright, that is set. I can now rotate the bar back up and around. This part, which is basically the top half of the track for the breech, has a little half circle cutout, and that actually faces the valve assembly. So that goes up, faces the valve assembly, and I'm going to point out real quick, the bottom half of this lines up with this right here, the bottom half of the track assembly. So you hold that in, you slide it down. That is now ready to go. Then you're going to notice this plate that is on your barrel. When you pull all this out of the way, well, you're going to need to hold all this down. This is where things get really interesting. When I pull this back, you have the first spring you put down under the trigger has that little leg sticking out. this is where that goes. You need to hook that little slot onto that spring. So that is on, that is in there. At this point it would help to elevate the barrel with something so things just don't start blowing up in your face. Because, I mean, this really is not the hardest BB gun to work on, it's just super irritating. So, all of that is now in. The next step is, unfortunately, you have to load the trigger spring. So you have to hold down on the track for the breech, rotate this guy up, and it goes right on top of this bottom peg. So when you pull it forward, it rests right there. At this point, everything in the center of this gun is trying to spring up and out of the gun. So I just keep a finger on it. You take this spring right here, loop it through the trigger, bring it all the way forward and hook it to this peg. So this is where things start to get kind of real. So alright, I got it. First try. You'll probably do it 3-4 tries, but I wish you the best of luck. At this point, you should have the rest of the gun assembled, and pretty much you can hold it down with that spring. Everything's ready to close once you line it up. This part lined up at the bottom. There should be a nice flat edge right here ready to go. This is a trick I came up with. I did not look this up. I found that this is really the only way to get this gun back together. You take this spring, you come in this way. Don't hook it to this. Bring it in, hold down that breech assembly, and bring in the cover. And put your screws in. The only real difficult part about rebuilding one of these guns is just closing the lid and trying to keep the breech assembly from exploding and having to chase down all the parts. Now you take this guy, your spring, and you hook it back to your hammer assembly inside the gun. There's going to be that little tab on the bottom of the hammer, and there's no way to put this back on without levering it back in. So take a little flat blade, put it on the peg, and just lever it in. It's kind of like putting on a trampoline spring. Then you should hear an audible click, which means the inside of the gun is functioning properly, everything's moving, and this is where you get to find out if your gun holds pressure. So you can take your CO2 cartridge. I highly recommend taking a drop of Pelgun oil, especially if this is going to be the first time shooting it after rebuilding it. Put it on top of the cartridge, load it in, tighten her up. Then it should shoot. Excellent. The gun works. Then we can take the lower half of essentially what I call an Uzi costume and lay it down. I'll just go ahead and fold out the stock because it'll make things a little easier. Take your forward sight, lay it in. Take your BB loader, lay it in. Then you take the muzzle of the gun. This notch was actually facing up when I took it apart, so I will put it back in that way. I don't think it really matters, but I will put it back in that way. At this point, you will want to put the left side cover back on the gun, because it's not impossible to do once you have it closed up. It's just really irritating from the bump right here where it says down for safe, it's kind of hard to snap it in after the fact. So just go ahead and get that over with. And once you do the rest of the steps in reverse, putting the upper receiver back on, you're ready to go shoot. Load in your 23 rounds, put her on fire, and it's ready to go. Put your side cover on. And go shoot some cans. Thanks for watching. If this was informative at all, leave me a thumbs up. If you have any comments, just leave them below, and I will do my best to get back to you as soon as I can. Stay tuned for more, and I'll see you guys later.